Well, I got a lot of things to talk about today, and this clock is up here counting down, so I'm going to have to get going really fast. And why is the slide? Oh, wait a minute, pushing the wrong thing there. Okay, let's just get started on cattle handling, some basic principles. I went to 3 absolutely marvelous feed yards yesterday. We worked cattle, went out and checked out the facility here. We're going to have a great demonstration tomorrow in this brand new facility. Was really, really impressed with the feed yards here. Just beautiful. Now, one of the most important things in cattle handling is a calm animal is easier to handle. I cannot emphasize that enough. Once you get them all scared and excited, it takes 20 minutes to calm back down. So let's stay calm. Now, how can we tell if an animal's calm? A calm animal will have nice, soft brown eyes. That's actually a scientifically validated measure. I know we want evidence-based, well, there is evidence for this. I can get the references on this. But if they come into your squeeze chute all wide-eyed, they're getting stressed. So what is some fearful behavior? Tail swishing, eye white, heads up, ears pinned back, pooping. We kind of looked at how much pooping was going on yesterday. Animals get scared, they poop. Another useful measure, and I'm a big believer in measuring handling, because I've been in this a long time, and one of my biggest frustrations is we go out and do a handling workshop and everyone goes, oh boy, wonderful. Then I'll come back a year later and people are yelling and screaming again, the electric jiggers are out, and the problem is they haven't measured handling. One of the things that we can measure is if an animal moves, right when you catch the head or squeeze it, you're hurting them. And we did find one squeeze chute yesterday where the pressure control was way too tight. You can really, really, really hurt cattle with that. And if animals moo in direct response to being caught by the head gate or the squeeze, you are hurting them, and you need to get that fixed. That's not okay. Now, a lot of little things that we don't notice can scare cattle, like a little chain hanging down. Also, yesterday, a lot of these facilities have air-operated gates. And the brand new facility here at the Hart feed yard is nice, quiet ones. They don't make any noise at all. But at one of the other feed yards, there's like shh, shh. The reason why that had happened is that the muffler system hadn't been maintained. So they just took it off and threw it away rather than replacing it. You see, this gets back to details of procedure. Animals are going to tend to balk where there is a change in flooring. Ideally you want to make flooring all the same, but wherever something changes, they tend to stop. I went through the facility yesterday and we've got one little glitch. They go from a dirt floor to a raised metal grading floor, and the only problem they've had is the cattle do stop at that. And I said, well, that is what cattle do. Now, the direction of a facility can have an effect. Animals are not going to want to head straight into the blinding sun. You see, right here we have a very, very bad reflection. Another time of day, you won't have this. Animals tend to go from a bright place, they tend to go into a bright place. They'll leave the darkness, go to a brighter place. But they won't go into blinding light. They don't like to go into black holes. Get down in your raceway and see what the animals are seeing. Well, we got some shadows. We also got people standing in the flight zone. And in all the facilities I went to, they've got the curved round handling system. There's a solid side on the outer radius, so they don't see the feed truck going by, those sorts of things. The inner radius is actually open. But when you have that open, you've got to stay away from it, except when you go to move animals. And we're going to be demonstrating that tomorrow. Those people are standing right where they should not be standing. Then you wonder why the cattle are jumping around in the race? They're jumping around in the race because you're in the flight zone. So some people think, well, let's just change the design of the race. No, just back up. Just back up and get away from them, and they'll stop jumping around. Now notice how that animal is avoiding walking on that sunbeam. I want to get you to be more observant. Observant of the little details. Time of day effects. There's a coat on a fence. Maybe there's a plastic bag on something. This is what I call the black hole. Sunny outside, building with walls on it. They will not want to go in on a sunny day. Now in the facility here at the Hart feed yard, it's got an open shed. Actually, that's good. They often work better in an open shed because they're never going into a blank, dark wall. Well, this one they put some, ripped out some tin and put in white translucent plastic. And at one of the other feed yards, they probably are going to have to do this because they have a shed with walls. And right when they try to get the cattle up into the crowd pen, they're not going in because it's going into kind of the dark movie theater effect. And there's one gate you always want to have solid. That is your crowd gates, your block gates and your crowd gates. Those need to be solid so they don't get smashed back into your face. Now I'm always getting asked by the public, are cattle afraid of getting slaughtered? That's a question I had to answer early in my career. And I found they behaved exactly the same way at the meatworks. In fact, Tees Brothers was one of the first meatworks I've worked on here in Australia. They behave the same way at the meatworks as they behave at a feed yard handling facility. They're afraid of getting slaughtered. They ought to be much wilder at the plant. That's just not the case. Okay, how many people noticed a big problem in this picture? A big obvious problem in this picture that's so obvious that most people don't see it? I want to make you better observers. We got 3 people standing right where they should not be standing. First thing we got to do is get people to stand in the right place. This shows curved handling facility. This one has a solid side on the inner radius. And ones that we're going to see tomorrow, the inner radius is open. Well, if it's a solid one, you work along it like that. If it's open, you got to stay out of the whole center part of the circle. I strongly recommend making the outer perimeters solid. There's been some livestock consultants recommend taking all the solid sides off. Well, what's been happening is people have been putting them back on, but they're mainly putting it back on all the outer perimeters. So they don't see the vehicles. Vehicles are really bad parked next to facilities. Outer perimeters, that's what you want to get covered up. Now in laying out a curved facility, you've got to lay it out correctly. Hope I can get the laser pointer right here. When the cow's nose is right there, he's got to see up there 2 body lengths. You bend it too sharp here, it will not work. Now I'm going to have my books here today, my humane handling book, and we are going to have to limit 1 per customer. We'll have them for sale at lunch up there. And please follow the drawing, especially where the single file joins the round crowd pen. Also, to make a tub work, you want to come on around a full half circle. A full half circle, that's important. And all 4 feed yards, including this one, have the full half circle. Because cattle have a natural tendency to go back to where they come from. So you want them to come on around and go right on in. Now you need to understand the animal's flight zone. You know, they vary. You know, some animals have a big flight zone, some animals have a small flight zone. And where you really need to respect that flight zone is when the animals are lined up in that race. You need to back off and get away from it, and then you enter that area only when you want to move them. Now here is a handy-dandy way to get an animal to go in the squeeze chute without the electric jigger. And it's kind of counterintuitive. What you're doing is getting in their flight zone and moving very quickly in the opposite direction of desired movement. We're going to try to demonstrate this tomorrow. And we're going to pretend this is the tailgate right here. And you kind of, they're lined up here, you kind of step forward. And you have to do it with kind of a quick movement. Because if I just walk back real slow, they just back up on you. Yeah, these are the kinds of things I want to demonstrate to you tomorrow, and I'll have a headset on so I can talk while we're moving them. We're also going to be doing a demonstration on ultrasounding, and so I'll be talking when we're putting the cattle in the chute, and the other speaker will be talking when the ultrasounds come up on the screen and explaining that. Right there, I'm using a stick with a streamer on it to turn an animal in the crowd pen. People get way too aggressive with driving aids. No yelling and screaming. It's okay to talk when you're handling cattle, but no whistling, no yelling and screaming. Cattle know that that's directed at them, and their heart rates go up. Calm down. You've got to calm down. Now notice here that this round crowd pen is not jammed full. Here at Hart Feed Yard, they only bring 10 cattle up at a time. Big mistake that people make is moving too big of bunches. You want to move small bunches up. Another trick is use your following behavior. Use following behavior. Wait until there's space in a single file race. And then you bring those 10 cattle up and they just come right on around the bend and they go up the race. We need to rename crowd pens of every type of design passing through pens. Use your following behavior, because if your single file race is full and you bring cattle up there, they're going to turn around on you. Then they're going to be harder to get out of the crowd pen. Also notice the crowd gate is on the first notch. Don't shove it up tight. Most of the time it can just stay on the first notch. And your guy in the purple shirt is standing back, so he's not in the flight zone. Now watch things like, what are the animal's ears doing? What are they looking at? Behavioral principles of restraining animals. Non-slip flooring. Got to have non-slip flooring. No sudden jerky motion. I'm very concerned about too much pressure on some of these squeeze chutes. They've got very large hydraulic pumps on them. When you push that lever, that squeeze chute should automatically stop before it gets too tight. If I can't get, when they're squeezed up, I can't jam my hand between the bars and the cattle. That's way too tight. You don't need to squeeze them very hard. I noticed one of our silencer chutes are over here. That's a very, very popular chute. Some people here might think it's weak and wimpy, but you know what? That's what it's supposed to be. You shouldn't be squashing a cattle. That was the one thing I saw yesterday that I was not happy about. Okay, we did some of the first research that showed that cattle that get agitated and throw a great big fit in the squeeze chute gain less weight. Other research shows when cattle run out of the squeeze chute fast, they gain less weight. So let's look at things that we can measure. Okay, vocalization when you catch them, and vocalization when you squeeze them. I want to get that stopped. Now obviously when we do the grab the ear to put this in, the cattle don't like that. We do have to grab their ear. Okay, if they move then, there's nothing you can do about that. But they should not be vocalizing and mooing in direct response to getting caught. Now my student's out collecting some new data right now, Ruth Woolly, she's finding that when you catch cattle across the jaw, they have less weight gain, and these ones that moo when you catch them, because you're hurting them with the squeeze chute, have less weight gain. So let's start measuring handling. Okay, how many cattle fall during handling? I hope none. How many cattle did you put the electric jigger on and get out of your hand? Get that jigger out of your hand. It's not your primary driving tool. I want animals walking into that squeeze chute, and I want them walking out. I can measure that. So I can measure vocalization, walking in, walking out, electric jigger use, falling down. These are some of the things I can measure. Now I can also start measuring eye white too. Now that's something that, if they just get a little bit excited, they start to get eye white. Now a basic principle in animal handling is when you force animals to do things, they get a lot more stress. You see, and when animals voluntarily cooperate with handling, because you've handled them really well, you get less stress. An animal's first experience, and this is really important out on the properties, with a new person, a new piece of equipment, or a new vehicle needs to be good. That's really important. Their first experience in the squeeze chutes bash their head in. They're going to get a big stress reaction just when they approach that chute. Some of the low-stress handling specialists today are advocating, and I definitely believe in this, is walking young heifers through the squeeze chute to get them used to going through facilities. Let's get animals used to handling. Now something that's new is both scary and attractive. I put this paper out there in the middle of the pen, all the feedlot cattle came up to it. And when the wind blew the paper, they ran away. Something new is attractive if you let an animal voluntarily approach. It's scary if you suddenly shove it in their face. Something like an umbrella. Now for example, animal thinking is very specific. So let's say they're trained to an umbrella. That doesn't transfer to a canvas or, flapping flags or something like that. I think it's important to get animals used to different kinds of vehicles. Get them used to some variety. Now this is one of my big ones. A man on a horse is viewed as something completely different as a man on the ground. And it's really important before cattle leave a feed yard to go to the BeefWorks that they've had experience going in and out of pens by a person on foot. Because I have seen feed yards that had wonderful handling, but everything was done on the horse, even bringing them up through the pen in the work area and to load the trucks. And when they got to the BeefWorks, they meet the first man on foot, and they are bouncing off the walls and going crazy and really dangerous to handle. But think about it, man on a horse is a different picture than man on the ground. So getting some experience with a man on the ground is important. Now you manage things that you measure. This is something I really want to push. We measure things and it prevents bad from becoming normal because people slip back into old rough, bad handling practices and they don't realize it. It happens slowly. The yelling and the whistling comes back slowly. The jigger use comes back slowly. More cattle are running out of the squeeze chute instead of walking. More cattle are vocalizing. We don't want to let bad become normal. Now, I've been involved with writing a lot of guidelines. Do not use these vague words, properly, adequate, or sufficient. Well, sufficient space. What does it mean to say they gave these animals sufficient space? I got a new word I need to add to this slide, relevant. I got that word from Edward Snowden. You all know who Edward Snowden is, the National Security Council. Well, if your Facebook account is relevant to national security, you're going to spy on it. You know, that's an example of the kind of vague guidelines that I just hate. I like to write clear guidelines. Like this is clear. All the animals have to have enough room to lay down at the same time and not be on top of each other. That's clear. Now, let's get back to scoring handling. How many animals that run? How many animals that fall? How many animals that vocalize when you catch them in the squeeze chute? How many animals with the electric jigger? These are the important things to measure. I also developed an animal handling system for the BeefWorks. It's been very successful. You can download a lot of these things off of my website, Grandin.com, it's my last name, Grandin.com, or animalhandling.org. This is the American Meat Institute measurement system. Now the thing is, you got to figure out what's the really important things to measure. Well, how many animals were stunned correctly on the first shot? That's a no-brainer. You got to get them all dead. How many animals was the electric jigger used? How many animals vocalized in the kill box? And how many animals slip and fall? You see, these are what are called an outcome-based measure. I don't tell you how to build a plant, but you've got to achieve certain outcomes. You can do similar things in feedlots and farms on things like lameness or stiff cattle. How many lame, stiff cattle do I have? You can measure those sort of things. And then you can tell, am I getting better or am I getting worse? And the thing about a really objective, well-written scoring system, you get what's called inter-observer reliability. You know, whether I visit this plant and inspect it or you visit the plant, we're getting the same score. Now in 1996, I'm very proud of this, only 30% of the plants could shoot 95% of the cattle on the first shot. Why was it so bad? Lack of maintenance. They simply weren't managing their stuff. You know, now most of the plants are passing this. You see, they had to manage. And most of the plants didn't have to buy a lot of expensive new things. They had to do a lot of repairs, a lot of things would add a solid side in just the right place. One of the things we're going to see tomorrow is we may need to put up a solid side so that when the cattle come up that open-sided race, they don't see the squeeze chute operator. Now that's not there now. This is a brand new facility. I'm going to just have to see how things go tomorrow. You know, maybe if it looks like we need one, maybe we'll get a piece of plywood or something and put it up. But you don't want those cattle coming around and seeing a person there. And then if the operator turns and gives the cattle the evil eye, that makes it worse. I mean, cattle recognize the evil eye. Now the principle of this scoring system is we're measuring a small number of critical control points that measure a lot of different problems. You know, they can move due to electric jiggers. They can move because you squeeze them too hard. They can move because a sharp edge stuck into them. You know, it's a lot of different things. It's the same principle as a hazard analysis critical control points for food safety. The other thing is it's directly observable stuff. There's a lot of interest now in animal welfare around the world. There's a lot of interest in standards for food safety and many other things. And a lot of people want to turn the whole thing into a paperwork audit. I put the emphasis on the things I can directly look at. I've caught too many people faking paperwork. And we have a Cargill Corporation and the JBS Corporation have video cameras in the plants. So auditors in a remote location can see what's going on. And that solves all the problems of people acting good, and it also solves a lot of problems with fake records, and some of that's been caught. Most plants really, really good, but 2 plants were naughty, out of about 15 plants. And the thing is, it's not a paperwork audit. It's stuff we are directly looking at. Okay, go out there and look at the feed yard. Are the cattle in a sea of mud? Are these cattle panting? You see heat stress, you can do Terry Mater's panting score. We watch cattle load. Are they lame? Are they covered with mud? You know, this is the kind of stuff, you know, that I would be auditing. Now, the scoring can also be used to help you improve handling, like air blowing in the face at the meat plant. They won't go in, so I got rid of that problem. I reduced the vocalization score from 4.5 down to 0. Or I have a dark entrance on a raceway. I put a light on it. Now, that will work on an indoor facility that won't usually work outside. The sun's just too bright, and I reduced the amount of squealing going on. This is my center track restrainer system. Now, if you'd like to see this thing work out on a real place, you can look up Beef Plant Video Tour by Temple Grandin. You know, Dinsmore's got one. Cheese has got one on their plant. Go visit that. And Beef Plant Video Tour we just did this year, because I think it's important to educate the public about how we do stuff. I think we have to look at everything we do and go, oh, would you show this to your wedding guests? Would you show it from your holiday friends from, you know, Sydney or whatever? A well-run slaughter plant passes that. We got about over 90% likes on it. You know, put a few comments on the site. And in designing this system, I had to design it so when the cattle came in there, they were about 2 meters off the ground. You can see I've got a little floor underneath here, so they don't see down. I got to make sure the plant doesn't let this get ripped off, because cattle will not, or any animal will not go over what's called the visual cliff effect. See, this is purely a behavior thing. Okay, I can also measure that I fixed something and I was able to reduce the vocalization score. Look at that reduced pressure from a neck restraint. Okay, that's very much like a squeeze chute. 23% down to 0 because it was squeezing her neck too hard. Well, that's a light, works well on an indoor place. Okay, easy to drive, hard to drive animals. That happens to be a pig example. You know, I'm seeing some problems with cattle. I get cattle in where they've never been handled by a man on foot. They're bouncing off the walls of the plant, really dangerous. It's the kind of cattle that run over people. Some cattle coming in lame, things like that. No, that's not okay. Now, in designing an auditing program, you know, it could be for food safety or it could be for animal welfare. There's 3 basic types of standards. And the old way of doing things is I'd tell you exactly how to build a feed yard. No, today the emphasis is on what's called an animal-based outcome measure. Okay, that could be lameness, that could be mud score, that could be panting score. Those are things that would be an animal-based outcome measure. And then you have a few practices that we just banned. I was on the OIE, you know, slaughter committee for the World Animal Health Organization. I said, we got to come out and say, you do not cut tendons on cattle. When that's being done in some, you know, developing countries. No, that's something we just don't do. And then on input measures, we're getting away from that, but there's still a few input measures you need, like maybe space on a truck, or if it's an indoor animal facility, ammonia levels. Now, here are some examples of animal-based outcome measures, you know, at the farm level. Okay, out on a property, body condition score. Usually that's not a problem in a feed yard. How many lame animals have I got? Dirty animals, animals with injuries on them. You know, and then in some of our organic programs, they're not allowed to use things like lice medicine. So you've got cattle with bald spots. And there's some people where we've gotten into a bad becoming normal that bald spots on cattle is okay. No, it is not okay. Maybe ammonia levels in facilities that are inside. Maybe abnormal behaviors. Usually beef cattle don't have that, more of a problem with the pigs. Well, we got about 5 minutes left, and I want to just open it up some really good questions. I'll just leave this up here. We might go back to this slide too, because if you're involved with writing guidelines for anything, I want you to think about, you know, these 3 different things. You know, let's look at HACCP programs. Okay, we don't tell you you have to use a certain kind of wash to clean up your meat. The outcome measure is your microcounts. What's your microcounts? That's the outcome measure. You know, if you can, you know, take yellow paper like this and stick it on the carcass and get great microcounts, fine. Don't think it's going to work, but that's kind of the approach to using an outcome measure thing. And then you still have a few input things and a few thou shalt nots. Okay, I'm going to pick somebody. Oh, we got a mic here. Okay, just say it to me and I'll repeat it back. Okay, the question was, how did I get involved in animal handling? Well, that started out back in the feed yards in Arizona. And this brings up the whole thing. How do you get people interested in something that can become a career? By getting exposed to it. And when my mother got remarried, my stepfather's sister had a ranch. I had an opportunity to go out to her ranch in Arizona, and that's how it got started. And then Lily Edwards Calloway, who works for JBS Swift, she was one of my students, and she had no previous interest in livestock, and she came out, she started working with cattle and working with pigs, and she found out she really liked them, and she ended up being in the industry. So it gets into the really important thing. We've got to expose young people to these things. It's just that simple. This gets into some of the things I talk about in my autism talks, because you get people, you know, a little geeky and nerdy, you get diagnosed with mild autism or dyslexia or ADHD. I'm seeing too many of those get a handicap mentality. Oh, they need to spend some time out at one of these feed yards. And they're going to find out they like cattle. You know, they're a great career for them.
Temple, I've got a question for you. In Australia, as a feedlotter, I believe that we're doing what we can to lead the way from an animal welfare perspective. I get frustrated, I guess, because I think probably the transport industries and the marketing channels probably lag behind the lot feeding sector.
Yes.
With their approach to animal welfare.
Especially the marketing part.
And do you see that in the US and
Yes.
what's going on over there in that area?
Well, the marketing, the auctions, livestock marketing, that's where we're still having some of the worst problems. You know, I think another thing we got to look at, we need to communicate with the general public. I mean, there's certain animal groups that want to just get rid of eating meat. Well, we're not going to convince them, but we need to be talking to the general public. And ag in the United States has not done a very good job at that. Okay, so they pass an ag gag law. So if someone takes a picture, that's a felony. Well, that's not a very good approach, because in the op-ed page of the New York Times, that looks really, really super bad. When you get trashed, you need to be opening a door. And one of the ways to do that is with video. I'm at the point right now where I'd like to see live video feeds to web pages for things like, you know, induction center at the feed yard, meat plants. There's one chicken company that's already doing this. You know, when you get bashed, you need to be opening the door, not closing it. But we got to remember, the general public is who we talk to. We now have 1 minute and 7 seconds left, and I'd like to get one more quick question in. Come on, the clock's counting down. And I've got the same countdown clock like Kate Kennedy.
Just had a question with regards to our industry as a whole. Obviously, you've been around various yards in the last couple of days.
Four feed yards.
What's your view on where situated in the industry on animal welfare? And I suppose we'd be looking at the community standing side of it.
Oh yeah, wait a minute, we're almost running out. We got 30 seconds left.
So just the first question.
Okay, these feed yards are really super nice. Really super nice. And on a lot of things are ahead of us. And I have to say that when it comes to the ID, you are way ahead of us. I'll be showing this to lots of people when I get home. I now have 15 seconds left. So I think we'll just end it right there, and thank you all for coming, and I'll be there selling books at lunch.